Hi everyone, I hope you can hear me. I'm Andrea Galately from Team Witch Doctor on the TV show BattleBots. If you're here watching live, then you already know that because you're supporting us either on Facebook or on Patreon. So thank you so much for that. It really helps amplify all of our efforts on educational content and behind the scenes content like this, as well as all of our efforts out in the community to teach kids how to build robots and show Witch Doctor in person. So thank you so much for that, for being part of the team. It really, really makes a big difference to us. If you're watching this recorded later on and you'd like to be part of the next live stream and interact with us and ask some questions, take a look at the description of the video so you can see how to sign up to be a Team Witch Doctor supporter on Facebook or Patreon so you can join next time. I really look forward to these live streams because the chat is a small group of BattleBots and Team Witch Doctor super fans. So it's really fun to get to know everybody and answer all the questions in a small setting. So welcome to the first live stream of the 2022 season of BattleBots. I think of it as the 2021 season because that's when we filmed, but it's airing in 2022, so I think it's officially the 2022 season. I thought what we do today is go through, first of all, the venue change to Las Vegas and what it was like to be in Las Vegas and film the new season of BattleBots. I'd like to chat a little bit about the new Witch Doctor and the changes that we made this year. And of course, we have to chat about our first fight card fight against our friends over at Duck with Hal and Hannah. So throughout the live stream, I'll be watching the chat, so make sure to ask questions on there. And I'll be answering them as we go. So let's get started. First of all, BattleBots has been in Long Beach for a few years in California near LA. So the change to Las Vegas was pretty big and we were pretty excited about just, a change of scenery. We knew Long Beach pretty well. And for a lot of us, this is all of our time off that we spend at BattleBots. So getting to see a new place was really exciting. After we shipped the robot, Mike and I actually drove out the same day. We decided to drive out to California. And for those of you who don't know, during the pandemic, we actually bought an ambulance and we built it out into a camper. And we drove it out to BattleBots last season and also this season. So this picture that you're seeing here is in the parking lot on the last night of BattleBots, just before we drove back out. And you can see that white tent that's there in the background is actually the tent where the pits were held. So a huge, huge space. And it's right basically across the street from the Las Vegas Strip. So the location was amazing. You could just walk and eat at any of the restaurants and kind of get a little time off in between matches because we filmed the whole show over 2 weeks and it's a very, very intense 2 weeks. So we don't have a lot of time off. But it was really, really fun to be on the Strip. That Ferris wheel, I guess it's kind of like a Ferris wheel that you see there. It's called the High Roller. We didn't go on it, but a lot of the other teams did. And on our way out to Vegas, we also got to enjoy the American West out in our camper. So this picture that you're seeing there was my favorite campsite. We actually got to spend the night right there where we're parked. And this is Valley of the Gods in Utah. So we fit some fun also in between and on the way back. So let's see. I see some questions already. Dan is in Las Vegas. I don't know if you got to go to the filming last season, but if you haven't, it was a lot of fun to be there live. Okay, so we have a question from Sarah that's asking, how did the shelf impact your strategy? Anything unexpected? Interesting question. We actually found out about the shelf when it was too late to make any design changes to our robot. I don't think we had shipped yet, but we only had about 2 or 3 weeks notice, so we didn't change anything. We were afraid to change anything at the last minute. And we figured everybody else was in the same boat. So we actually didn't change anything for the shelf. I think the way that it impacted most teams and us also is that it essentially made the arena smaller because we were all avoiding it as much as we could. So sometimes when at the start of the match, like Mike will drive the robot around one way, around the other way, we almost never go straight head on. We don't go for the box rush. So now it's really simple for our opponents to know which way we're going to go because we're not going to go towards the shelf. But it played, as you saw in the very first episode, very first match, it did play a role already, and we were all watching very closely to see how other robots dealt with the shelf. I think we're all still kind of figuring it out. But yeah, it definitely impacts the strategy. You don't want to get caught up in those areas next to the shelf. I think the shelf itself is not the most dangerous thing. It's those little pockets that it creates next to it. And Sawblaze's first match with Minotaur, like a robot like Sawblaze wants to get you up against a wall to pin you and bring that deadly saw down. And now he has a lot more perimeter to do it on. So I think it's definitely going to change some outcomes. It's going to play a part. But changing the arena, it's a level playing field for everybody, so we are all having to deal with it at the same time. And it's not so bad for our kind of robot or vertical spinner. It's definitely impacting horizontal spinners a lot more like we expected, because the arena definitely gets small for them really, really fast. All right, so let me show you the pits. So one of our concerns about filming in Las Vegas was that it's going to be really hot. It was about 100 to 110 the whole time we were there. We were there in late August. But BattleBots and the whole production crew did a really, really great job of making sure that we were safe and comfortable and that the robots were safe in that heat. So they actually put up this whole tent for the pit. So this was a temporary structure that they built. Our pits are all the way down at the end. We actually got to pit next to Hijinks and near Hypershock and Kraken, our fellow Florida teams. So we were really happy about how the pits worked out for us, and our little corner of the pits was really fun. Like I said before, we film over 2 weeks, and there's a lot of matches in that time. So we're basically living in the pits that whole time. And there were still concerns about the pandemic. Obviously health concerns, but also concerns that if anybody got COVID, you'd be quarantined, that you might have to drop out of some matches or drop out of the tournament altogether. So staying healthy was really, really important for many reasons, even to stay competitive. And as you can see, we had plenty of space. We were really far apart from the teams next to us. And we didn't have any cases of COVID the whole 2 weeks with a crew of, I think with the builders and production, we were probably about 500 people, if not more. So it's a huge, huge production. And I think the pits really helped. It was so cold in the pits that I actually ended up wearing a jacket most of the time. So that was pretty unexpected. If you look at the floor here, these tiles are actually plastic tiles that they put, so it's actually like a false floor that they raise up. And what happened with that is that Las Vegas is really dry. So as you walked over those plastic tiles, it actually created static. And then anytime you touch somebody else or you touch a metal table or anything that was grounded, you'd get a really, really big zap. So that was unexpected and a little bit of a concern with the robots. We have a lot of sensitive electronics. And also a little bit painful. I got shocked a lot of times. So all of the teams, it's a lot of robot builders, so we're problem solvers. And a lot of the teams came up with the same solutions. But we actually ended up putting aluminum tape down on the floor so that we can ground ourselves more often so we wouldn't build up as much charge. And if you look on the right side there under Mike's shoe, there's a piece of aluminum tape. And on the left side, you can also see on Curtis's shoe, he has like a yellow strap on the side. So we put metal on the bottom of our shoe so we would be discharging constantly whenever we were in the pit. And we have a lot of little shocks instead of one big shock. And we also built a grounding strap for the robot. So that was an unexpected thing to have to do at the beginning. And it was just a change of venue. There's no way anybody could have known, but it's something that definitely affected a lot of the teams. So Nell is asking, is it important for the bots to stay at certain temperatures? Temperature definitely affects the robots. When we had Shaman with the flamethrower, even the altitude difference between LA and Miami affected the pressures in the tank. It was a lot hotter here than it was in LA, so we had to recalibrate our flamethrower when we got to the actual conditions that we would have out there. But the biggest concern here was to not overheat our motors and our batteries before you even went outside. So there was a battery tent, and we actually queued up in the battery tent, and production would let us go when they would let us know when it was our turn to go into the BattleBox, and we would walk the robot outside directly to the test box because we have to do testing before each match. And the test box were air conditioned. The inside of the test box was air conditioned, and then we'd roll them right inside. So they never stayed outdoors for more than 5 or 10 minutes because the metal gets hot and it's like an oven in there. So we definitely wanted to stay safe. The whole battery tent was also air conditioned. Jude wants to know, was there an audience this season? there was an audience this season. We were very excited about that. I can't tell you how weird it was in 2020, especially because we had some trouble up front, but to go out for a match with, no audience, no one cheering, and then you win or you lose, and you do your interview, but it felt so empty without the audience there to hype it up and really show you how much they care and how important it feels. It was really odd. So I was really happy to have the audience back this year. We had full stands on the weekends. I don't think we were sold out during the week. But the audience was awesome. And even though we were being very careful because of the pandemic, we did get to do some meet and greets outside, and the VIP tours that came through the pits, we also got to interact with them. I see Carl is here. We saw Carl a few times. You want to see a lot of matches. So Carl knows all of the information, everything that happened this season. So yeah, speaking of Carl, he says, I think your position in the pits allowed the team to get more visibility from the tours than those at the other end. Yeah, that's true. The VIP pit tours actually came in through our end of the building, and they toured there, and then they went to see the machine shop. They weren't allowed because of COVID to walk all the way through the pits like they had in other years. So we had fun. We got to meet all sorts of super fans. We even met a dog that had a witch doctor hat, light up hat on, that was probably nicer than all of our hats. That was definitely a highlight for me. Chris says lipo and lithium ion batteries don't like high temperatures. That is absolutely true. That's why we were very careful not keeping them out in the heat. They get hot enough in the robot. The first thing we do when we come out of a match, win or lose, is take the batteries out and let them air out. Because of that danger, there's a tent where you have to leave the robots in for 30 minutes, or the batteries in for 30 minutes, to make sure that they're not going to blow up or do anything crazy after the match, because it is definitely a danger. Nathan asks, I feel like you and Zoe from Chomp are the OG women of BattleBots. Do you feel like there is greater diversity in BattleBots now compared to a few years ago? Yeah, definitely. I mean, season 1, there were about 20 teams, and now we're up to about 70 teams. So it's just from numbers, you'd think that we have more women-led teams. There's also, I think, a lot more diversity within teams, not just looking at the teams that have a female captain, but there's a lot of teams that have women in important roles on the team. So it's been a lot of fun to see that. I'll tell you, I just spent a week at the South Florida Fair working on robots. I was repairing robots for a show they were doing. They basically built some hammer robots and doing 4 shows a day. And I had some great experiences there talking to girls that were watching the show. And I also had a few bad experiences there for people passing by, just making comments about me being the one working on the robots. And it's still, crazy to me that I still hear things like that. But it really makes it even more important to be out there and do what I love doing. I'm not doing anything crazy. I don't, I'm just doing what I like to do. And it's really an honor that inspires little girls to want to do this too, because we need everybody in engineering and in BattleBots. I'm sure you guys are like me, where you watch BattleBots and you're looking for new ideas and new robots, and those crazy new ideas come from that diversity. So I think we've made a lot of headway, and I can't wait to see in the next few years what happens. Nathan says, I'm raising a tech nerd girl, so you two were inspirations for her. Thank you so much for that. It really means a lot. Like I said, I actually started building robots at an all-girls school, so I didn't find out that this was a boy sport until it was way too late, and I was already way too into it to back off. I knew too much by then. So it's still, it's discouraging to me that other girls have had different experiences. I guess I've been really lucky. But I'm definitely proud to be able to represent and to do it in such a fun way and doing something that I really, really like doing. Julia says, we kind of missed having the other teams in the audience, though. Yeah, I agree. I wish that they had kept the opera boxes. I wish it didn't have to be the audience or the teams getting to be in the audience. From a selfish perspective, I loved being able to watch matches from the audience. In season 1, we used to be able to run up and watch a match and come back down because the show was new and the audience wasn't sold out, and it needed people to kind of fill the stands. And I really miss being able to do that now. So I wish that they had kept, you know, maybe just on one side of the arena or something, they had kept the teams there. I think it was also a really fun addition for the show to be able to see how people react, how all the teams react to seeing their friends or their enemies, either way, win or lose in the battle box. All right, so I'm seeing some questions now, specifically about a match with Duck. So let me go ahead and talk a little bit about the new Witch Doctor first, and then we'll dive into that. So here's what Witch Doctor looked like this season. At first, it may not look like it's very different, and that's on purpose because we're trying to make sure that it's still the same Witch Doctor, it's still recognizable, and we still keep the things that have worked well. We had an amazing season in 2019. We won 7 matches in a row, and then we won 2 more matches in the Las Vegas Remars. So we learned a lot of things that worked well, and we didn't want to lose that magic. But obviously in 2020, we had issues with our weapon disc breaking. If you haven't seen it yet, I just put out a video on YouTube explaining our very, very long journey to figure out exactly what the issue was and how we fixed it for this season. So if you want to get a little technical and see that background, then I think that'll be a fun video for you to watch. The biggest change I'd say we make this year is that we made the entire robot 3 inches longer. We did that so that we could better protect our weapon motors because we didn't have space down below and they were really close to the ribs before. And we also hope that it makes our robot more stable. A lot of people tell us we have one of the best self-riders in the game, and I think that's because we use it a lot. I'd like to use it a little bit less, and that means building a robot that doesn't flip over as much. So we're hoping that the longer wheelbase helps with that. And then another big addition that you probably see right away is that we added these kind of skeleton bunny ears, as we call them, to the robot. Those are to help the robot drive better upside down if we need to get out of trouble before we can self-right. And more importantly, it allows us to keep our weapon spinning at full speed while we self-right. Before, when we went upside down, the weapon would hit the floor and then we would self-right. Now the weapon will still stay spinning, so once we self-right, our weapon is at full speed. And then we made other changes for reliability that are, you know, not as obvious. And then the other big change, which of course we had to make after a 2020 season, is we changed the steel of our disc to AR500 instead of the S7 tool steel that we were using before. An aesthetic change is that we now have 3D printed fingers on our wedge that are going to fly off every single match because they're just double face taped on. But usually we just had stickers, so this is kind of a step to make Witch Doctor a little bit more sculptural, which we try to do every year. We went through all of our safety inspections. This is our full team this year. Actually, we're missing one person here. He must have been doing something else, probably chart in the battery tent. And Witch Doctor this year was right at 250 pounds. A lot of people ask how much Witch Doctor weighs, and they think we say 250 pounds because that's the weight limit, but we push that 250 pounds every single time. We have different armor configurations. This was right before Duck, so the robot was at full weight going into that fight. And then here's the team about to go in the tunnel for the first time. So this is kind of a moment of zen where you've done everything you can do and you're all in costumes, and the only thing left to do is walk through that tunnel and go through the 3-minute fight. So it's a lot of fun. There's a lot of nerves here because you're hoping that you didn't forget anything and that everything's going to work out how you expected. So with that, let me go back to some questions. I saw a bunch of them flying through here. Eric wants to know Witch Doctor Vex model when. I'm dying for one of those toys. I can't complain because we've had our fair share of toys already. I think a lot of other teams need a turn, but I love those Vex toys, the Minotaur and the Bite Force. Or actually, I guess just Bite Force and Endgame are the ones that have the Vex ones that are remote control, so they're bigger and they're much more difficult to build. I'd love to have one of those. I don't know, tell Vex and Hexbug to make one. Guard Blaze wants to know what happened to Witch Doctor's weapon during the fight with Duck. Okay, this is a big question. As you know, our team sometimes has a little bit of growing pains our first couple matches, and that's because you can't really test these anywhere. If you watch our latest YouTube video, you'll see we did more testing this year than we ever have, and we still didn't catch this issue. because some things you just catch in the arena. So we roll Witch Doctor in a cart. We have like a hydraulic cart that has pretty small wheels. So when you're rolling it over the pavement, it's really bouncy and rough on the robot, which should be no big deal because it's about to go into the BattleBox. But this year we bought the same controllers we always buy, but they had a new batch made, and the molds were changed just a little bit, that some parts got physically rattled in there. And one of the controllers was just not working at the beginning of the fight. So right from the start, if you look at our very first spin up, it's kind of a little lethargic and it's not quite as quick as we like it. And then you'll see, even though we get pretty big hits on Duck, the weapon kind of stops when we hit and then it starts to spin back up. So it's clear that we're not at 100% power. So Witch Doctor is at 50% power because only one motor, or rather one controller, and then one motor was working in our weapon system the whole time. So our weapon system is designed to work with 2 weapon motors. It's not designed to work with one. We have to have both. So because we had one, that motor did all it could. It got some nice hits for the first half of the match or so, but then it overheated. And I made the decision at that point to shut down the weapon instead of letting it go on and smoke, because that motor was going to smoke. I could see every time we hit, the spin up would be slower and slower. So I knew what was happening. I couldn't do anything about it, but I knew I could see what was happening. The way we drive, Mike drives the robot and controls the self-rider, and I drive the weapon. And this is one reason why we do it that way, is because I get to concentrate on just the weapon. So I get to see how fast is it spinning up, how is it following through hits, do I need to adjust the speed up or down to get better bite. So there's a lot going on with the weapon. So because I was responsible for only that, I was able to notice that this was happening, and I decided to shut it down before it smoked when I saw that it was going to be useless anyway. And that's because we were preparing from the beginning for a 3-minute fight with Duck. I mean, Duck is infamous for not dying. And in our very first match of the season, we had to plan for a 3-minute match if anything went wrong with our robot like it did, to make sure that we got all the points possible with the judges. So that's what happened. We had one controller down and one motor was trying to power the weapon all on its own, and it just couldn't make it the whole time. So the good news is that even though our hits looked pretty big in this fight versus Duck, the weapon was actually only at 50% power. So once we're at 100% power, you're going to see twice as much power out of Witch Doctor. So we have that to look forward to. And we did go back to the pits. We found out exactly what the issue was. We made a physical modification to the casings, and that won't happen again now. So luckily we learned this with a win. We don't always learn those lessons with a win. But we shouldn't have that problem anymore going forward. Chris wants to know, how much different was it hitting Duck than hitting the test load? So the test load is definitely a worst case scenario for us because we didn't put wheels on it, so it was down on the ground, which means that we actually had to bite into the steel armor to be able to toss it. Duck has wheels, so we can kind of get under it, or we can bite onto the sides. But the really big difference is that when you hit the test load, you hit it once, and then you reset everything, and you make sure everything's safe, and then you hit it again. Whereas Duck, you're hitting over and over and over, or trying to at least, within the 3 minutes. So the thermal load on the motors and the controllers is a lot more to be doing that repetitive hitting than to hit once in a test scenario and then reset. And, we're taking videos, so we're resetting the cameras, and we probably hit once every 5 or 6 minutes instead of hitting, 10 times in 3 minutes. We've been trying to figure out a way to test that. But obviously every time you hit the test load, it moves and it goes further, and it's hard to have a big open space that's safe enough to keep chasing it around and hitting it. But definitely something to try for next season. Dan says, I don't think the shelf made much of a hazard because it was easy to get off of it. I did like the sides be covered. I thought the sides were going to be covered also. When we first saw pictures of the shelf, I thought you were only going to be able to get off by jumping over the screws, basically, which for our robot is kind of dangerous because our wedge comes out in front of our front wheel, so it's possible for us to kind of nosedive behind the screws. So if we happen to be up there, we'd rather not go over the screws. We'd rather go over the side. It does turn out that the sides were not blocked at all, but they were up like a foot off the ground, so you had to be able to get off with enough speed that you wouldn't just kind of end up high-sided on on the edge. So it's still tricky. I wouldn't want to be up there on purpose because I really don't want to lose a fight up on the part of the arena. Definitely prefer to lose to the opponent than to the arena. Sarah wants to know if you have a personal robot enemy. Ooh, okay. Personal robot enemy. I definitely have some rematches I'd love to have, but I'm not sure that we have like an enemy where we constantly try to defeat them. I mean, in season 1, we broke Tombstone's bar, but we lost the match, and then we got our revenge in Las Vegas when he broke our disc and we won that match. So we have a tied record with him. So I've been waiting for that tiebreaker for a while. Last season against Hydra, we lost because our weapon disc broke. We found out later for an issue that wasn't really related to that match. So I'd love to have a proper rematch with Hydra. You know, Hydra went on to get the #1 seed last year, and they're obviously a huge competitor, and we'd love to prove that we can show our own against Hydra. But I don't know that we really have like a robot enemy or somebody that we fight all the time. Sawblaze and us have a 1-1 record also. We beat him in 2019. He beat us in 2020. So that would be a good rematch to have. I just think anytime you lose, you think of a million things that you could have done differently and different designs for the robot, and then you're just dying to try it and see if you were right and if you could win that match. So I'd say it's more about evening records than robot enemies. Mark says, how many fights can they get in a day? How much time is needed before and after fights? So this year they really try to fit in a lot of fights. So usually we do 2 episodes a day, one in the morning session and one in the evening session. I think each session's like 4 hours. Carl can probably correct me because he went to 14 sessions, he said. This year though, they were trying to do 2.5 episodes a day. So there were even more matches. And there's also matches that you don't see because they plan that they're going to have to cut some from the episode, like the YouTube exclusives that you're seeing. Although honestly, this year, even the YouTube exclusives are really, really good. Like all the matches were so good. I'm sure it was difficult for them to try to figure out which ones to cut. How much time is needed before and after fights? This really depends. You know, you hear the saying, the matches are won and lost in the pits, and it seems really cliche, but being able to turn your robot around fast really, really comes into play, especially after the fight card. For the fight card, you know, there's 70 robots and everybody's trying to get, there's 3 fights, I think it was this season. So you're not fighting more than once a day. So there's plenty of time in the fight card, which is great because that's when we're finding problems and fixing things. But as you get into the tournament, like in 2019, when we made it to the finals, that last day was super, super packed. We had, you know, maybe a couple hours between fights. So we built 2 witch doctors this year. It's the first time that we do that for the tournament. Fully built witch doctors. And that was helpful, but we found that we kept repairing the same witch doctor because that was the one that we knew. And we knew like every detail and everything that had been done to it. So even though I thought we were going to alternate, like do our first fight card with one and our second fight card with the other, we kind of ended up using the first one for all the fight cards. Because we knew it was working well and we just kind of had a good energy going with that one. So we didn't want to take any chances. Nell says, is there a team or bot that you enjoy watching fight the most? Yeah, I love watching Hydra fight. I mean, my favorite robot was Bronco, for the same reason. Like just watching flippers do their thing is so, so cool. I mean, these robots weigh 250 pounds, which is a lot. It takes 2 strong people to lift it, more comfortable with 3 or 4 people. So when you deal with moving these robots around all the time and then you see them fly, you know, 5 feet above your head, it's a pretty cool thing to see. And Hydra is a really new kind of robot. The hydraulic system that they have is something that they're developing and nobody else has really done before. So that's also really, really cool. And I also like to watch Tantrum a lot. Tantrum is also a new kind of robot and they've really been evolving it every year. You know, we had never seen a punching spinner before, which is really cool. And there's a lot of complexities to making that work. So yeah, I'd say I love to watch definitely new things in the BattleBox. So Carl is clarifying there were 4-hour sessions averaging about 10 to 12 matches a session. So in past seasons, they would give us like a fight order, but this year they were trying to get through so many fights that they would tell us everybody they had to fight in a day, and they would take the order as people were ready. So if you were ready to fight and you wanted to fight and your opponent was ready, obviously you can just fight right away, which I always prefer because then you get more time to fix after the match. So if you're ready, let's go, let's get it out of the way, rather than have to wait all day with like the nervous energy of just waiting to go into the battle box. Carl's asking, are the teams able to watch any of the matches in the pits? So we are. We actually have TVs in the pits, every 3 or 4 pits that have a live feed of the battle box. So there's editors like switching the cameras constantly. I think it's the same feed that the audience sees on those screens above the battle box. So we get to watch all the matches. And then we kind of record the screen for each other's matches so we can share videos later, because most of the time we're working on the robot and we don't get to watch all the other matches as they're happening. And then you find out you're fighting, let's say Duck, for instance. So you want to go back, if this match was later, obviously, and watch all of Duck's fights this year so you could see how they're fighting and kind of develop your strategy. So having those TVs in the pits is super, super helpful. Chris is asking, with all the fires this season so far, was that due to the Vegas heat, or is it related to a lot of teams switching to full brushless systems? Yeah, I don't think it's related to the Vegas heat at all. The robots were kept air conditioned most of the time, so I don't think that would have been an issue. We have not made the change to brushless. If you watch our latest YouTube video of the slow motion testing really closely, you'll notice that we had brushless brushless motors in the robot for that match, because we did do a lot of testing with brushless motors. And we ultimately decided that we just didn't have it under control enough to get that risk out of the way this season. We know that whenever we switch, we're going to have to do some learning in the battle box. So that's a big risk. So we are trying to do all the testing we can in the off season. We were testing the same motors that Hypershock actually ended up using. We share a shop with Hypershock, so we were doing a lot of that development together. So we're watching his season very closely to see how it works out for him and learn from his experience, even though obviously it's going to be a little bit different in our robot, but he's a vertical spinner and he hits really hard, so we can get some of that experience from his robot, kind of pioneering that. So we're doing that testing. We still had issues at the point of that testing. Right after that test, we decided not to go with those motors. And then we got lucky enough to be sponsored by Mag Motor, which was kind of like the last sign that it was just meant to be that we were going to keep our mag motors and keep going brushed this year. But it's still on our to-do list for sure. Are the brushless systems causing the fires? Teams are also switching to more powerful LiPo batteries, and that means they can deliver a lot more current. So when people are using smaller batteries, the battery can kind of act as a fuse since it can't deliver more current and keep other things from blowing up. I think that's kind of maybe what's been happening to Tombstone. I might be totally off. I don't have any insider information, but just from the looks of it, it seems like his batteries went up in a blaze of glory his first match. And I imagine that huge weapon on Tombstone could just pull all the current that it wants. And once those batteries can deliver all that current, it's just a recipe for disaster. So it's really important to dial in the batteries really carefully. And really, we're all pushing these robots to the limits of what everything can handle. None of these parts are designed to go in combat robots, and every robot is more powerful every year, and with that power comes more risks. So I think it's just something that's going to happen at the beginning of the season. You're going to see some fires while teams dial things in. Stacy wants to know, what are your thoughts about all the long forks being used? I don't like the forks. You will notice that Witch Doctor has resisted the forks. Obviously, they're a competitive advantage. It's a lot easier to hit your opponent if you can get under your opponent. But the BattleBots floor gets worse. The box floor gets worse and worse, and you get hung up on the saw slots. And for us, maneuverability is a really big part of our strategy, so we've resisted. I will tell you, we did make forks this year. We will wait and see if we use them. because we just felt that for certain opponents we should have forks in case we changed our minds throughout the season. But yeah, I'm a big fan of fighting with our weapons, not with wedges or forks or anything else like that. I mean, even when we fight Tombstone, we put a defensive wedge on it that doesn't affect how offensive our weapon can be. Our weapon sticks out just as much in that configuration as any other configuration. So I'm a big fan of fighting with weapons, but the sport is definitely seeing a big move towards forks. So we're just going to hope to destroy a lot of forks, and then maybe that'll make them go away. Henry says, what match of the ones televised so far was your favorite to watch? Oof. I would say, honestly, the Sawblaze Minotaur fight. Even though it was a very first fight, it's just kind of set the tone for this is what the season's going to be. Like, these robots are not messing around. I mean, Minotaur is the top of the top, and Sawblaze just cut into them. They have a 1/2-inch aluminum base plate. Ours is only a 1/4 inch, for example. So I think that match just had it all. The shelf came into play. The driving was amazing from both teams. And it was just kind of like a feeler of, okay, this is for real. This season is going to be intense, and these robots are better than they've ever been. So I think I said it in one of my interviews, if not this one, maybe the next one. But I was like, I looked around at all the robots, and I lowered my expectations for the season, because it's not like you come in here like, oh, I did well 2 years ago, I'm going to knock everybody out of the water. It's like everybody has been improving their robots all season, and it's really anybody's game this season. Nathan wants to know, what technical T-Rex come out of hibernation? Also, does technical T-Rex hibernate? We might do some videos with technical T-Rex, even if we don't do Tail of the Tape. I think it was in the first episode, an audience sign for technical T-Rex, which is pretty awesome. We worked him in a little bit into the last video we posted. So we definitely want to keep technical T-Rex going. We love him. He's under an NDA, so he can't go work for anybody else. The Bot Whisperer's job is safe for now. But yeah, we definitely hope to keep bringing him back. We have a lot of fun with technical T-Rex, and it seems like people really enjoy learning the technical side of BattleBots. So we'll keep that going as long as people want to see it. Guardblaze says, you've been put into a tag team match fighting against Whiplash and Valkyrie. Who do you choose to be your ally for this hypothetical fight? So I saw this question from Sean before, since he commented on one of our posts with it for this live stream. First of all, Whiplash and Valkyrie are a great team, so we're going to have to stack our team also. Let's see, it's a lifter and a horizontal spinner. I think Hypershock would be really fun to fight with. We've never fought against them, and we're good friends. And I think we would take on Valkyrie while he takes on Whiplash, because Hypershock is so fast, and we're traditionally pretty good against horizontal spinners, so I think I'm going to go with Hypershock for this one, because it would also be really fun to fight on the same team as Hypershock. So yeah, I think I'll stick with that one. Lisa wants to know, have you had a fight against Hypershock? We have not had a fight against Hypershock yet, but we've been in every season of BattleBots since the beginning, so it's only a matter of time. But we say that every single season, and it hasn't happened yet, so we will have to wait and see. Stacy says, I agree with you about the forks, prefer to see the weapons face off. Yeah, I agree. Forks, they just don't make matches very exciting, but they do make a big difference in matches. So, you know, maybe we're the ones that need to add forks to our robot. I don't know. Maybe the fork game will end at some point. Carl says, do you ever send broken components back to sponsors so they can improve their products you use? So we don't have a lot of sponsors that actually give us parts for the robot. Mastercam is one of our title sponsors, and they machine parts for us. And they actually came out to BattleBots, and we wanted to make some changes to some of the parts, and they actually remachined them on site on the CNCs that were there. So if I get a chance, I want to make a video about that whole process, because it was really cool to have a sponsor on site that could make new parts as we change the design on the fly. That was really cool. And then we also use Magmotor. Magmotor sponsors us. And they've actually already listened. They've already made changes based on our feedback, or feedback of teams that use Magmotor. They used to sponsor Bite Force when he was on the show. So if you go on the Mag Motor website, they actually have a section of their website that's for combat motors. So that's pretty cool. A big reason why we love using Mag motors. Also, I've been using them since high school, so I know exactly how they work and when they don't work and when they're going to break. So we're really, really good at using them and fixing them and replacing them right before they break. So that experience is really important. Dan says, I've used brushless motors in my power wheelchair, kept having trouble with them burning out. They overheat often. How do you keep them cool? So we're not using brushless motors yet. We're using brushed motors. But usually if the motors keep burning out, it's just because the motors are too small. You could add like liquid cooling and some complex systems to try to keep them cool. But ultimately, it's usually you're just trying to ask too much power out of a motor that's too small. Surprising that would happen in a power wheelchair because they're usually designed to not have that happen. Obviously, that's a risk. So yeah, I would definitely say to push it less hard. It's usually our option, but if we think our motors are overheating during a match, we would back off and maybe not go at full speed. Adam says, what's your favorite hidden design detail about Witch Doctor that most people probably don't know about? It's not very exciting, but this year we designed these 3D printed cases that fit over our speed controllers and manage the wires, because the speed controllers, we don't actually screw them down to anything because there's so much shock that we'd rather put foam around them and have them move a little bit so they don't see, kind of absorb some of that shock. And the case actually routes the wires to keep them safe from crashing into other things. And it also has a little pocket to keep the receiver in there, because the receiver is connected with really small PWM wires that we're always paranoid they're going to get pinched in something. And then we labeled each one with the current limit of the controller and what it was for. So it made it really, really easy to service the robot, and it kept everything really tidy. And this just worked really, really well. And it was this like super simple 3D printed part that I'm sure will never be seen on television. But it made a really big difference. Not that exciting, but those little details can really make a difference. Chris says, no forks. It's greater than forks. It's greater than bike rack. Yeah, the bike rack, you could do the bike rack once, but I don't think it would be as amusing a second time. Nathan asks, what team that left BattleBots would you like to see return? I mean, Bronco. I love Bronco. I would love to see a redesigned Bronco. I'm hoping that they're taking this time that they haven't been on the show and kind of revamp all of Bronco and come back and show everybody that they're still relevant and they're still, one of the big bots to beat. I'd love to see Chomp come back as the walker that it was. Chomp is just such a cool robot, and I know everybody gives him a hard time, but we're hesitant to try brushless motors instead of brush motors because they could risk our whole season. I mean, imagine everything that they're risking all at once every time they go in the box just to push the sport forward. So I have a lot of respect for Chomp, and I'd love to see them keep trying. All right, so I think we're caught up on the questions for now. So I am going to go through some of the damage pictures from that duck fight. So it's worth mentioning also that Duck was not at 100%. We heard later they were having some drive issues because they switched to all brushless motors. And they skipped the last season, and Duck was already built. So they actually had a lot of time practicing driving and, using that whole drive system. And they still had trouble their first match out, which is why a change to brushless is such a big deal. And you see kind of teams struggling with it at first. Obviously Duck is not a robot that is going to damage you enough to knock you out, but they kind of take all of your hits until you break yourself, and they can outdrive you and outcontrol you and definitely beat you in a judge's decision. So we were very cautious about that. So here's some pictures about those hits with our weapon before we lost our weapon for the match. So here over there on the side, over the Proto Labs logo, you can see the signature Witch Doctor teeth mark. So we were definitely glad to see that. Our weapon just didn't break despite a big hit like this. And this was at 50%. It was just with one motor. So we were pretty happy with the level of damage we were doing considering that. If you look at this one, this is in, I told you we have that tent where we kind of cool off the robots. Both teams are in the same tent, so it's kind of the first time you get to see each other's robots post-match and see all the damage. So you can see Duck here right out of the battle box. So you can see the fork mounts are broken on one side, they're broken off, so he only had one fork left. His beak, we definitely hit his beak and it resisted really well, so that survived really well. You can kind of tell his whole robot is kind of like bowed in the middle, like the beak is kind of bent down a little bit. I know Hal said that it wasn't necessarily bent, but the different pods were kind of unbolted together. You could definitely see the other fork mount is bent. So we were pretty happy with the level of damage we were dishing out, considering we were only on one motor. So this, was promising for our new design, but obviously we just need to get another match under our belts where we have the weapon at full power. And then as far as Witch Doctor goes, Duck had these new wheels that were, they kind of call them like the Brazilian tires. They're made by the Brazilian teams. And they're like vulcanized rubber. So we have a lot of marks on our robot. You can see on our front wedge there in the green, a lot of black tire marks. And you see some of the duck orange paint. And all of our purple parts are aluminum, so they're pretty soft. So you can see just from bashing into each other, we have some good scars from that match. And then, as is BattleBots tradition, Hal came over and the whole team signed one of their fork mounts that we ripped off and gave it to us as a kind of a battle trophy. This is a tradition in BattleBots. We do it too anytime that we can. And it's, over the years we have an awesome collection of souvenirs like this that remind us of some of our favorite fights. So this is really, really special to us. And you can see the new Winter Pogs. So you see that Greg comes up and hands something to the teams, and a lot of people have asked what that is, and it's these Winter Pogs. They're a little bit different this year. So we just double face taped it onto the duck part and kept it on there. And then here you can also see our pit corgi. This is one of our teammates got this for the team, and the pit corgi kind of overlooks everything, keeps everything safe. So if you look at our videos or our pit photos, you'll probably notice a corgi in the corner somewhere in most of them. I think he even went out for one of our fights in somebody's pocket. So the pit corgi's been a fun addition to the team. All right, let's see. Nathan had a question that he posted before that I don't think we've covered, which is, what rookie bot has impressed you the most so far? I think we've only seen a couple of rookie bots so far. We saw a profile on Switchback and their fight with Gruff, and we saw Riptide and their fight with Huge. So I know we still have some rookie bots left to go, but out of those two, I'd say even though Riptide's match was more impressive, because obviously Huge is a veteran bot and they defeated him very quickly, I was really impressed with Switchback from a whole package. Not just the robot, but the pit crew and their setup in the pit and the amount of spares they had. They were just kind of ready to be a serious contender. They didn't really look like a new team. So I know that, if we're still fighting new issues at the beginning, I'm sure they're fighting new issues as well, as you saw in their first match. So I'm really excited to see what they can do once they get some of those worked out, because they have a lot of experience in FIRST robotics, so they've built robots before. And I'm just curious to see how that experience applies here to BattleBots, and I think they're really, really ready to really be a contender. Nathan is reminding me about Blip. Yeah, Blip did beat up on poor Rusty. You're right, Blip. Yeah, Nathan's right. Blip has to be the most impressive robot in the whole field, not just impressive rookie, because that whole system that they have is something totally crazy that Aaron came up with, and we saw that it works, and it works really well. And the craziest thing to me is that it looks like a wedge, but if you see his victory dance at the end, the robot gyros. It gyros like a spinner gyros, and that's because there's a spinning flywheel in there. This essentially makes it behave like a spinner when it drives around, and it does a little gyro dance like Minotaur can do. So that's really wild and unexpected to see. And Aaron and Tantrum are dealing with 2 robots this season, which I can't imagine having 2 robots. It's enough work having 1 robot. But they have a huge team and they seem well prepared for it. So definitely looking forward to what Tantrum and Blip can do this season. All right, I think we are, it's 6:50. I was hoping to go about 30 minutes and we're at 50 minutes, which is great because that means everybody had awesome questions. It's been a lot of fun to get to talk about all of this. We filmed this back in late August, so it's been like 5 months and we haven't been able to say anything about the season to anybody. So it's really fun to start talking about it, especially with all of you that know the show and the team so well. Carl wants to know if we'll be doing general show watch parties again this year. We're in Florida, which has been a little tricky with the pandemic because we are like way high in a peak right now. We'd like to do in-person watch parties, and hopefully in a couple of weeks things will be back to a reasonable risk level and we can do that. We love doing them in person, so we'll definitely let everybody know once we're ready to do a watch party. I'm sure we'll do at least a couple. Hopefully by the end of the season, COVID is no more and we can get back to normal and get everybody together again. So I think that's it. Thank you everybody for joining. Thank you for making videos like this possible by supporting us and supporting our channel. I really can't emphasize enough how much of a difference it makes. We love to do content like this. And we no longer have the income that we had teaching the classes at the Makerspace. So having this supporter group has been really a lifesaver for all of our educational programs. So thank you again for that. And again, if you're watching this recorded and you want to become a supporter to join us next time, take a look at the description below so you can see all the information for that. If you haven't yet, make sure to watch our latest YouTube video. We're not doing Tale of the Tape this year, but that means that we are going to spend some more time doing technical videos about our own robot and our own content. So keep an eye out for those as well. So that's it for tonight. Thank you everybody for joining, and I'll see you right after our next fight for the next video. Thanks everyone. Bye. Good night.